All right. Good evening to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to Uncanny X Chronicles, the unofficial X-Men 97 podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And thank you so much for joining me on these weekly breakdowns of episodes in season 2 of X-Men 97. Following the airing of each season 2 episode, we're going to be providing a brief recap of each of those said episodes, as well as some analysis and some theories of what might be coming next. And additionally, each week we will have a special guest host joining us to also give their thoughts, analyzing the episode, as well as their theories as well. So without further ado, let's get into this recap of episode 4. If you give me one moment. So when we last left the children of the Atom, we were left on the cliffhanger as Rama Tut seemingly killed both Insabanur, aka Apocalypse, as well as the faction of X-Men were stuck in the past with him in his near vicinity, thanks to a blast that seemingly destroyed the celestial vessel that they were both residing in. Picking up from that moment, it is revealed that Magneto had shielded Professor X and company with his force field, and Noor, being the durable mutant that he is, had survived. Thanks to their said ability, Magneto, that is, said ability to survive Tut's attack when Ball and his fellow Sandstormers could not. Professor X, Magneto, and company are able to momentarily ease the prior conflict between Insabanur and themselves. Upon doing this, Xavier takes the reins from Magneto as Insabanur's mentor by sharing where Magneto himself and the X-Men are from, giving him a breakdown of the promise of thriving mutants in the future. And lastly, their shared goal to reach a lost temple believed to have the cosmic power needed for them to be able to return back to the present. After probing Noor's mind, they're able to determine the location of the temple, setting course to the destination as a result. However, once there, in a moment of R&R, Tut uses his tech to reach Charles psychically to convince him that he should be the one to gain access to the temple instead of Noor. However, Xavier decides to ignore the former and carries on with the latter being Insabanur and his X-Men. Soon enough, though, upon entering the temple, it is eventually revealed that Insabanur was destined to arrive at that said temple, so that per the glyphs in the temple, he can be gifted with the celestial tech necessary to become the villainous Apocalypse that we all know and love. Though part of the team manages to acquire the tools needed to go back home and are able to do so, Xavier and Charles found themselves stranded as they team up to battle Apocalypse. However, now augmented with the celestial tech, added to his already impressive strength and durability, Apocalypse is able to overpower both Xavier and Magneto, resulting in the near destruction of Rama Tut's kingdom, and also resulting in the death of Eric, aka Magneto, who was executed in front of Xavier. Bishop returns moments later with a broken Charles holding what is left of Magneto, a charred helmet, thereby closing episode 4 on quite a somber tone, but not so fast. The episode also boasts an end-credit scene with Wolverine on the roof of a facility, seemingly planning a possible attack on that said facility. However, before he can do so, he is joined by Captain America and Black Widow, who bring him intel, which the document that they are able to provide to him is labeled with the name Weapon X. And if we know, our Wolverine lore, we know what comes with Weapon X when we're talking Wolverine. Of course, we're talking that adamantium skeleton. So Cap warns Logan the dangers of the mission that he is hard set to engage in, but Logan implies that he has help on that said mission that he is set to embark on. And that brings us to episode 4 that we just had this past week. Now, With that, let me introduce the guest host this week. Today's guest shares a variety of interests that I also have as a gamer, as a photographer, a tech aficionado, and as well as a comics fan. It is my pleasure to welcome back the owner of Eyes of Age Photography, Mr. Harry Crossland. Let me bring him on now. Harry, what's going on?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. So, pleasure to have you here, joining this week to talk episode 4 of X-Men 97. Before we kind of dive into like the analysis and some theories that we might have, or even Easter eggs, what were your initial impressions?
Okay, first of all, I feel kind of bad because I should have stuck around for the end credits because I watched it and I was digesting it and I was like, as soon as you started talking about end credits, I was like, oh, I missed stuff. So
Don't
I'm
feel
gonna
bad.
definitely go
I
back and
went
watch
back
it.
to watch it a second time, and I found out later that it was an end credit scene.
Yeah,
Like I was so blown by what happened at the end. It was like so messed up. I was
yeah,
like, okay, I'm good. It's like, and they had the somber X-Men tone, when they would give the
right.
end credits. Like it's
Because
over.
once you see that, okay, I guess I could cut it off now because they
Right,
didn't even have any
exactly.
music. I like, I guess I
Exactly. The
can cut it
music.
off. Yeah. So the between this one and episode 3, it's like, how does this show outdo the Age of Apocalypse movie? That's
Yeah, right.
because honestly, it's straightforward to the point. This is how Apocalypse was created. This was what kind of existential threat he became. And I'm
Poses, yeah.
like, there was a whole ass movie that did this almost 15 years ago. It was nowhere near as good as this.
Yeah, I know.
But the bigger thing is this. This literally was one of those things where if it ain't broke, don't fix. Meaning, like, it seemed like the more Charles and Magneto was trying to push him away
From
from
his destiny,
but
yeah.
the further and faster they were pushing him right towards it.
Or is it? Yep, I agree.
Right. And I mean it's a formula we've seen in storytelling many times. This one was told again quite well because I watched both of those episodes like, when's he gonna become Apocalypse? When's he gonna become Apocalypse? He's Apocalypse.
Win.
Like you just wanted to see it. And the thing I really did like too was that they added a lot of depth at telling how he came to be.
Yeah.
And the fun part about it all is outside of Eric and Charles trying to turn him away from that path, the one really big voice that I felt had an opportunity but didn't do more was Rogue.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because she
I
had that
agree.
one scene, she was talking about had he ever
Love.
loved, and he's like, well, there's no room for love in my life. And then she was like, well, I hope so for all your sake. And then she went to sleep. I was like, damn, all this could have been avoided had, but it was what it was. And I don't know why it was. I did not see that was going to become Kang. And
Really?
yeah, I didn't see it because, yeah, I did
Okay.
not see that coming.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
kept saying to myself, Rama Tut. I was like, I know it's something bigger than this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
You
always
built
been the case.
you built this whole city out of tech and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And I kept saying, I know it's going to be something bigger than that, but I did not see the King. I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I know like when it comes to that character and his lore, and I know he has a very convoluted lore because he's a time traveler and all
That's probably why.
his various variants, if you will. But yeah,
Yeah,
like those are one of the I know like Tut is like actually one of the most prominent or one of the most well known or famous ones because he also ends up contending with like if memory serves with the Fantastic Four too. Like they have to
yeah,
battle him at some point, during his time as that iteration. So, but one thing that I will say is they never see it never ceases to amaze me how much they are able to cover pacing wise with this
hmm
show.
hmm
The I was skeptical with some of the beats that they had in the first season, but yet within 10 episodes, they were able to cover a lot of ground that had they
Yeah,
done it back in the 90s, that would have been more than one season. They would have dragged that along
yeah,
with like they would have dragged probably everything with Madeline Pryor within one season. They probably
yeah.
would have dragged out her arc as Madeline Pryor when she realized she was Madeline Pryor. That would have been a whole other season. So,
And you
it's a
got to think too, because Fox owned it back in the day. If
yeah.
they had done it like that, yes, they indeed would have done, because that would have been like a 20 episode arc probably.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I
they
forgot how
wouldn't
many
have
cartoons they had to put out back in the day, but yeah, but that would have been a long arc.
art.
But yeah, that's
You
what.
had to
And
sell
the
those
thing that
toys,
still,
right?
yeah, but the thing that still astounds me too is how even in these shorter episodes and seasons, how they do pick up so much from the comics. You
Yeah,
know, from the source material. Like, we're going to tell this story, and we're still going to condense it enough where old heads like me can, like, yeah, I remember that story arc. And then newer fans out there is like, well, hey, where can I get the comics, where can I get the trades, what's going on, because it might not be the
right,
exact same thing, but these are the things that keep continuously happen when you have Apocalypse in the mix of things. He's like,
right.
for the uninitiated, Apocalypse is to X-Men what Thanos was to the Avengers.
Avengers, yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
and I want to come back again, and I want to say this. I remember there was an Agent of Apocalypse movie. Ask me if I remember what happened. I just know that it came and it went. Um, Now I'm gonna give credit where credit is due. They did do a good job at Oscar Isaac being Apocalypse and showing the many various forms and stuff, but the movie was just so bad. But again, I'm going to circle back. When you have a cartoon like this, and in 2 episodes, you manage to really do the job that the movie couldn't do. And then, see, the other question I had too, and I guess this is going to lead to our speculation.
Yeah,
What was going on in the present? Because it's like we got to remember, part the way through that 4th episode, Beast and the rest of them bounced back to the present and left Magneto and Charles there.
right.
So like, what happened when they got back? Like, is there anything we need to know? Like, because we don't know, because yeah, Bishop seemingly appeared a few minutes later, but nothing was going on. But you know how it is. If one thing's already going on in the past, how's it affecting the present? Because
Sure.
it's like a butterfly. It's like a butterfly effect.
Exactly. Especially when we're talking about the way the X-Men have done their future related stories. Obviously, the MCU has diverted in a different direction on how they approach time travel. But when it comes to the X-Men, it's back to the future rules. You go to
Right.
you go back, you change something, it ripples through time all the way up to through the present. So
Yeah. Because
so yeah, hold on to that thought because I definitely want to unpack that. One thing that I will unpack is going into just the analysis episode. One thing that you brought up that I wanted to be able to dive into is just that idea, and I mean it was a thing even within the first 3 episodes, but it continued as a through line in this episode. In episode 4 is just that idea of what is truly set, what are things that are events. And I know that they talked about it in What If. Actually, I forgot, I think they called it a nexus point, if memory serves. I think that's what they
something
called
like
it.
that.
But
Yeah.
basically those events that no matter what you do is still going to happen. And just that idea that it which makes time traveling stories fascinating is,
Mhm.
can you truly change things, or is it truly inevitable that you really can't work your way around it? Because honestly, if we're talking about, could Apocalypse have truly been quote unquote the first X-Men and been different and turned out differently, would it have been possible had they gone back even earlier? Maybe, before he was snatched up by, Ball and the Sandstormers, where, he had that developed that mentality or was raised as a slave. Maybe had he been,
raised differently.
taken right at that moment, things might have been different. But I feel like because all of that transpired, even though he wasn't quote unquote apocalypse yet, it was already past the point of no return because he had already
Right.
experienced being a slave. He had already experienced loss. You know, he talks about
Being
it, just like
shunned.
you said,
Yeah.
in that moment that he had with Rogue, where he's saying, I've lost everything. Everyone that I've actually ever cared about has either abandoned me or they have died. Like I've lost them. So that gives you a very cynical perspective on, can understandably give a character like that a very cynical perspective on the world and their worldview. So maybe at that point, no matter what they did, it would have been past the point of no return unless they
Right.
went back earlier in his life.
Right. Like,
Uh,
and I was thinking about that too. See that, and again, that's the paradox of telling a good time traveling story, because sometimes it seems like the easiest solution would have been, hey, if we got to do all this and we want to prevent XYZ thing from happening, let's nip it in the bud and take Apocalypse out at birth, or kill his mother, or just like those things are easy, but they don't make for good stories.
right.
So it's always one of those things of like, the what ifs. Because I mean, granted, yeah, you got Bishop, who is a time traveler. You got Kang could have gone back and did that. I think
Exactly.
I think Kang throughout all of this is just really just being okay. Hold on, I got to go forward a tiny bit.
Okay.
Kang is pretty much being an agent of chaos
Yes.
because he's a time traveler too.
Yeah.
So I think he's like, oh, we got this other dude that's going to come around and he's going to give X-Men blues. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I'm just going to let it play out. I'm just going to do everything I can, because notice what happens. What happens is, he comes along, he builds this great city, he has all these slaves. Apocalypse is one of them. He abuses him, he molds him. He almost
Knowing full well what it
right.
what it will result
He
into. Sure.
almost Darth Sidious is him, if you see where I'm going with that. But he molds Apocalypse's path, and then once it is realized, notice what happens. He's like, well, my work here is done. I'm out. And
But is it though? Is it though? Because here's the thing, and this is me playing devil's advocate to your argument. I agree that he is trying to mold Apocalypse, but if he was honestly didn't really have any skin in the game, so to speak, he wouldn't have even bothered to stick around as long as he did. I feel like he still wanted to be able to utilize Apocalypse as a tool, because at the end of the day, he did want to get to that temple. He did want to
right
get to the celestial
to that
technology
shit.
before Apocalypse did. And he gave, again, going back to what I was just talking about with those nexus points, there were a couple of moments where things could have gone a different way. Like I just brought up one where it could have gone back further to get him when he was an infant. That was
Yep.
one point. You have another point, even in the episode itself, where Bishop was ready to go. He had the bands, whatever they needed to go back, and they
Yeah,
could have avoided
all of that.
being able to help him get to the temple and all that, because that wouldn't have happened had Professor X not gone in his head and helped him figure out what the location was. Had they
And
gone back home,
right.
maybe none of
That,
what we had the Age of Apocalypse would have happened, because they wouldn't have helped him get to the tech.
that comes back to your question that you brought up, is with all of that has still stopped, because that's why I was coming back to, because again, it's like they really just accelerated the process.
Right.
That's how I felt like watching these two episodes, that you just accelerated the process of him becoming Apocalypse. What could have been done to avoid that? And yeah, seemingly it's nothing, but it's like once they dipped their toe in, it seemed like no matter what,
They
because
interfered, yeah.
even Charles said it. Even Charles said it seemed like no matter what we do, this was your destiny, because that's what Apocalypse was saying. Like, you guys were doing nothing, because he felt like he was being lied to. He's
And
like, you
Kang
guys,
warned them. Kang
right?
warned them. He was like,
He got in
look,
Charles' head
man,
and said,
I've
look,
seen all of these timelines. You guys never
never
win. You
win.
guys always lose. I'm trying to help y'all out. Let me just yeah, it's gonna be under my reign, but
But
if you want to get rid of
pick a poison.
Apocalypse, that
Pick a
is your
poison.
only, the Doctor Strange element of it.
Yeah.
One possibility out of like a million. This is the one possibility that we can change that.
Mm-hmm.
So But no, like I said, all of those things are fascinating. Another thing that was fascinating to me too is how we had the kind of the good cop, bad cop element of, Magneto and Professor X, respectively,
Yeah,
as quote unquote mentors for Apocalypse. In the first three episodes, Magneto kind of took the lead and was, allowing him to be kind of, I hate to say, kind of stabby and take action. But I
yeah,
feel like if Professor X took the lead first, he wouldn't have condoned Insabanur to attack, Ramatat's stronghold, because he would have been, against that. And perhaps, if again, going back to another Nexus point,
would they have
if
pushed
that
it
didn't
faster?
happen, he wouldn't have retaliated against the Sandstormers for attacking him at his, at his stronghold. So it brings
Right.
up, and then I was gonna say there was reason why I bring up that approach that was fascinating, because this is again going back to terrific writing, and I was like, wow, that was a great line. Is that line that Magneto gives, and it gives so much perspective of him and Xavier's kind of dichotomy there, the different ways in which they operate, but how they still kind of coalesce and come together at certain
Yeah,
points,
yeah,
is when
I
he
know exactly.
says,
Yeah,
yeah, when he says, perhaps that's why I gladly played the
the
devil,
devil.
pushes sinners to embrace the saint. I was like, wow, that is an awesome line.
Hmm.
Like, just that
Hmm.
idea where, okay, I'm gonna allow myself to be the
To be the
bad guy,
bad guy.
so that way people will, gather to you as the, in contrast, as the option that they should take.
Right. And see, and what I like so much about that line, and what I've liked so much about this show and their relationship, and matter of fact, I can even kind of swerve towards the movies. In the later movies, it becomes apparent that Eric and Charles, they're not solidly good guys. They're not solidly bad guys. There's all those shades of gray in between. Both of them just have different methods to get to the
Sure.
same place where they go.
Yeah.
And this show demonstrated that. This is, it's also being, it's been demonstrated in the comics, because I remember the last X-Men run I read was the House of X, and that's when
Sure. Yeah.
all the mutants came together, say, you know what, screw all y'all. And
Right.
this is one of the things I've liked seeing coming out of the storytelling of as of late, is like, you don't have Magneto just like, oh, I'm just bad, 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 I'm just trying to do. He's like, no, I got a different approach. Let me help. And they bounce off of each other. Him and Charles, they bounce off of each other so much in trying to get the main end goal, and that's just preservation of mutant kind recognized. And the thing of it is too, is when you're looking at these 4 episodes, you can also tell Magneto has changed in a sense. Like he's not as, so again, black and white,
Yeah.
or absolute in his stance, because he realizes that, Charles has some influence in how he approaches stuff. So you start seeing that that's why he took that mantle of leadership to try to lead Apocalypse where he was going, not realizing, hey, I'm just further hastening the path.
Yeah.
Which also brings me, because we haven't touched on it, you know, how does Eric come back from being atomized?
Sure.
because
Sure.
because the thing of it is, we all know,
And I
we
have some
watched,
thoughts on that.
right,
Definitely.
we've watched enough comics. I mean, we watched enough TV shows, movies, and read enough comics. You can get atomized today and be back tomorrow like ain't nothing happened. And again, when you got three, Cable, Bishop, and Kane, you got 3 time travelers in the mix. That's an easy fix.
And you're also adapting something where something else happens that would make sense to happen based on what you are currently adapting. That's all
Yeah.
I'll say.
Yep.
So I feel like that's a good segue to actually get into theories. And I found it fascinating that we did have a cameo there in the episodes that we had with well, I believe the character's name is Genesis. So
Mhm.
the character that you have there, the female character that you have there, that is basically an agent or a henchman of Rama Tut, um, actually has history with Apocalypse. So it'll be fascinating to see how they incorporate her into
Yeah.
the said story with Apocalypse.
Yeah, because again,
But
I'm sorry,
yeah,
because again, Kang left her high and dry, but he did that for a reason. That's why I say he's being like an agent of chaos.
orchestrator. Yep,
Yep.
orchestrator, puppeteer. Um, So I will also say, you brought up earlier just that idea of what the idea or the theme of love, and I don't think that that was accidental that they spent that much time on that scene, because I
Mhm.
feel like, and this is going back to really good writing, you plant the seed for something for it to take effect later on in the story, and I feel like that is going to be necessary later on in terms of them having to battle Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Um, that love is going to have to come into play somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Uh, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like I said, it seemed like it was an important enough scene where they wouldn't have spent that much time on it
Right.
otherwise.
But the thing of it is when you think about it, I kind of see it slightly different. It's like they didn't spend a lot of time. Here's the thing: it's not so much the time that they spent on it; it's how important that
Hmm.
scene is. That's
Hmm.
that's the thing, and that's the thing we forget. It's like sometimes writers slide stuff in just because to the casual viewer, it's a throwaway scene because okay, at night they're going to banter for a little bit and then they're going to go to bed. Blah, that's it. But like I said, that stood out so much because again, when you have the episode starting off where Charles is diving in to his head, seeing what's going on, seeing how much he's lost, seeing how much he's shunned, and then almost right after that, you do have that scene with Rogue talking to him and asking him and trying to actually humanize him
Yeah.
somewhat that stands out. And again,
Yes.
it's going to be a major way at how that's going to play for future episodes because at some point, Apocalypse is going to have something that he's willing to not lose, that he's willing to save. Because
Right.
that's always kind of been the whole point is throughout all this, he has nothing to lose, everything to gain. He just wants to claim his destiny. But once he starts getting what he believes is rightfully his and building up, there's going to be something. And see, the sad part is that I cannot remember the source comic stuff enough, but I do remember at some point there was like something out there that put it this way, everybody has a weakness. Every character has some kind of weakness somewhere. What is it that they're not willing to sacrifice? So I guess the question is whether or not they do it in the cartoon. What are if we're going to get around to seeing what that thing is that will actually have Apocalypse like, let me think about this.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, if that is the case, because let's consider, and this is actually just thinking about just X-Men as a whole in terms of their animated run. When we're
Uh,
talking about the original, Fox series, yeah, they were able to thwart, Apocalypse's plans, but they've never actually really been able to defeat Apocalypse. And
right,
so if you clearly, if this is a character, and we've seen it before in other media, right, where we have characters that or villains that are, you know, insurmountable, issues for your hero, and the way to actually defeat them is thinking, doing something outside the box versus just punching and shooting it. Like, you have to
yeah,
actually figure out a different way to be able to defeat it. And Apocalypse being who Apocalypse is, that they've never had success in doing it the old-fashioned way, like they've been able to do with other characters. Other characters where they've been able to work together as a team and physically, with their might, defeat that said villain. That has not been the case with Apocalypse. Yeah, they may, you know, uh, like I said, thwart his plans and defeat whoever is kind of like his lieutenant or second in command from the plans that they have that is orchestrated by him ultimately. But at the end of the day, he still continues to be a thorn in their side. He continues to come back again and again and again and again. So maybe by using something else, something like love, that will be enough to curb him from being the existential threat that he has continued to be thus far
Right.
in their run-ins with him.
Yeah. Oh,
So yeah.
one other thing we forgot.
Oh, and I want to also give a shout out. You said X-Men Apocalypse. I meant to say this earlier. Shout out, however way you may feel about the movie, it is 10-year anniversary. It's crazy to believe. As of May, it's been 10 years since that movie
Yeah.
came out. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. What are we going to see from the Celestials? Because remember that was the
Yes.
big point of the show was he had access to that ship.
Yeah.
And we do know at some point during Apocalypse's run, he does run across the High Evolutionary. And that's
Yes.
probably one of the only other beings that could go toe to toe with them. So are we going to see that here, or is that just going to happen? Something happen off screen, whatever. And also, if I remember correctly, since we are in Egypt, Khonshu, aka the spirit that guides Moon Knight.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things that they can do.
Yeah.
I'll give them credit that they have been able to focus the overall story that they're trying to capture and have been able to pepper it with Easter eggs if you really, know the lore and the comics and everything. Like I said, I
Yeah.
just brought up what you had with External, the female character there. You've had other characters pop up. I mean, we had Captain America pop up again. We had Black Widow pop up. But that actually even brings me to what you seem, I don't know if you were alluding to this, but where they might be going in terms of potential villains if they somehow figure out a way to defeat Apocalypse and maybe he goes on kind of his, what is it, his Thanos farmer mode where he
Right.
still exists out there but he's not trying to like destroy everything.
Mm-hmm.
What if, because of all the chaos that has been created from what they did in the past to them potentially dealing with, Age of Apocalypse going forward, now that they've kind of sped up the appearance of Apocalypse, that it leads to what is it, Onslaught?
Possibly.
Because you talked about the idea of how can you bring Magneto back, right?
Yep.
You could always say that because of what transpired in the interaction that Professor X, because they do this a lot of times, especially with psychics, that sometimes they're able to somehow have such a connection in terms of them being able to communicate with another mind that sometimes they're able to play with, and this is a writing choice that they may have on the show, that they're able to have some type of connection to their consciousness somehow, even if the character doesn't have a physical body. So
Right.
what if
Right.
somehow Magneto's consciousness in that very
Survive.
traumatic moment survived, but it actually, because of that very traumatic moment, ended up going to Professor X and he has it locked away
I was about to
somewhere.
say there's a reason why his helmet survived.
Yep. It could be
There's a reason
locked
why
in
that
that
helmet
helmet.
survived. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then because of all that grief, all that frustration of everything that's happened, the loss, that we
Uh-huh.
end up getting the Onslaught. Because they kind of played with it in the Fox series. They had a really, I don't know if you remember this, they had this really small moment. I want to say it was like post Shi'ar, post Phoenix saga, where they had Professor X. You guys can let me know in the comments if y'all remember this. They had like a small arc for Professor X when he kind of went evil and he
Yeah, I do
wasn't.
remember that.
He had like a cape or something, if I remember, or like
Yeah.
he had something where he was like walking, or I guess he was on like the psychic plane or something, and he was like causing all types of mayhem. But they didn't go full blown Onslaught.
Yeah.
So now that we're doing this, there's an
May as
opportunity
well.
to do that. And now that we know that other characters exist in their universe, like they've been playing with that, they've already kind of set the precedent for that. We know that the Avengers are out there. We've seen, what is it, Captain America and all these other characters. We know that there are
got
other,
the X
even though this is an
Force.
X-Men show,
Yeah,
even though this is an X-Men show, we know other characters are out there. They've already set the precedent of having cameos. So now they can actually do a decent adaptation of that Onslaught arc, because you can bring in the Fantastic
you got
Four.
all the ingredients in place. Just go
Yeah,
and do it.
you can bring all those characters in place and it won't feel forced, because you've done it thus far between season 1 and season 2 to
And
establish that there are
right,
other characters
and
out there.
doing it as a 10-season episode avoids the whole thing of trying to condense it all into a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's so many fascinating things that they can do. But one thing that I do want to ask you, because I asked this, I was shout out to Kevin Sampson. I had him on the show last week, and talking about some potential what is it, horsemen. Who would you gather? I mean, Gambit is a given at this point, but in terms of the other three, do you have any theories of who we might have? Do you think that
You got
external might
Strife.
be okay?
Strife, and of course, Archangel was already out there, because remember that's how Angel became Archangel in the first place. So that's almost going to be a given. At some point, something's got to happen. I think where Apocalypse
It's Archangel.
gets his hands on him, whether it's in the present day or that future timeline where he already exists, or at some point in X-Men's past, he's going to get his hands on him. Because again, if you're going to do that and you're going to create those four horsemen, you already got Archangel
Or Cyclops. I didn't even think about this. If they go full blown Age of Apocalypse, I mean, they could take Cyclops too.
I forgot about that. Yeah, they could. Because if I remember correctly, too, in the comics, I think it was in the comics, Strife was that close to killing Apocalypse, and it was probably again another one of those characters that very few could go toe to toe with him. Strife was also almost close. So yeah, there are so many ways that they could go with that. And then of course, what will ever happen if Cable and Apocalypse get put in front of each other? We don't even know how that might turn out. So yeah, just so many possibilities as to what they could do. And I think if they continue the run that they're going on and do it right, they can knock it out the park.
And I was gonna say, here's another thought to kind of get things going, is talking again about the possibility of saying everything is there that they need in order to do Onslaught, right? If you go that route of kind of having Apocalypse, go his own way just momentarily, you now have that interesting dynamic of what happens in the Onslaught story when they have Apocalypse help them as an ally, or I'll put in quotation marks, helps them as an
enemy
ally.
of my enemy, etc.
Right. That could be an interesting dynamic where you have Cable and Apocalypse having to work together in order to take on Onslaught, because you do have a moment like that in that arc where, like I said, you have all the pieces. You're talking chess, right? You have all those pieces in play that you could actually execute this story. So I would be shocked that they did not take advantage of that and actually, because they've been very ambitious thus far with stories that we haven't yet gotten in the initial run of X-Men. So that would be something else that would kind of separate it from the current run of the show. And that story gets pretty dark in terms of the casualties, and they've shown thus far that they're not very precious about taking the show in dark places, which I appreciate. It's very mature, and then they don't kind of talk down to their audience, because I guess if we're thinking that many of the audience members are now grown adults and have kids of their own, but I'm sure that there are instances where people that are watching the show are also watching with their kids, perhaps. So it will be fascinating to see, should they go that route of what places they go to, how dark they get, because as I said, they've done some pretty wild things where I'm like, wow, I can't believe y'all were brave enough to go that route. I mean, I don't know if you remember, and I talked about this last week, and it's still in my mind. I'm like, wow, this is Disney Plus, where they had the Emma Frost moment. You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? Where she was about to go to her office.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. And that blew right by me. That just slid right on
Bro.
by me.
And then she got interrupted. She was like, oh, the X-Men. I was like, yeah, what were you
You
planning on
thinking,
doing if the
right? What
X-Men
was you
weren't in that
doing?
office?
Right.
So, yeah, man, like, so if we're getting into like the final third verdict, your thoughts on the episode, I'll give you the floor. If we're talking
Well,
about number of
it's
X's, right? If 5 being perfect and making our way down, 4 being good, well, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean 5 because everything's connected. It's and matter of fact, with this episode and the prior episode being linked together, it's hard to separate them. You can't have one without the other. So again, another solid episode.
Yeah, no, I agree too. Like I said, it continues to amaze me how much they're able to throw into a given episode with X-Men 97. They impressed me in the first season of how much ground they were able to cover over certain arcs and how they
Yeah,
were able to make it very streamlined. They're continuing to do it now. I just hope that they're able to keep the momentum that they've had thus far.
right. Oh,
That's my only thing. Just continue, just finish it strong.
stick the landing.
Yes, please, please, because we've seen it time and time again. I've seen it, you've seen it on many shows that we like, where they continue, season after season, they up the ante, they up the ante, they up the ante, and then by the time we get to the end of things, it's like, what happened?
Right.
So, there are a couple of shows like that. So I
Game of
won't
Thrones.
name so and don't get me wrong, like, I love those shows, but it's a very tricky thing, of
Yeah.
being able to try to stick the landing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know there are other things that come into play too. Sometimes things that are outside of their control, in terms of like budget. They may pull the budget for a certain season. They're not given enough, for that said season. Maybe each season they've been, given an increase, and then for whatever reason, based on the climate of what's happening with the network, they're not given the same amount, so they
Yeah.
have to kind of scale back. Things happen, but
Well, I was actually going to say this is also one of those things where I hope some forward thinking mind over there at Fox and Disney and all those folks involved have enough sense to say, okay, we got those original shows all the way back from the 90s. We got those. Great. They hold their own. Then we did season 1, we did season 2. We need to just plan this out for X amount of seasons, and then that's a wrap. We're going
yeah,
to cut it from here because, yeah, like, again, Walking Dead, how some things just keep going. It's like, okay, it's past its expiration
you
point.
jump the shark.
Let it
You
go.
jump the shark.
Let
Yeah,
it go. So
let it
that's what
go.
I'm hoping that they do is they just get to a point. Yeah, we've done what we set out to do, because I mean, granted, we're talking about something that was out 30 plus years ago that somebody decided to bring back, and you're doing an excellent job. Now you just got to know when to say when.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Because I mean, we've also seen shows like that where they have determined how many seasons they wanted to do, and the the show has worked because they've been able, like you said, to be able to properly map it out. And
Yeah,
that gives me
and
good hope
finish.
for. Yeah, I mean, that gives me good hope for. And speaking of Game of Thrones, I feel like they learned their lesson, and now doing the shows that they're doing now, where we've had with what is it, a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, as well as a House of the Dragon. That, if memory serves, for House of the Dragon, they initially were going to do 5 seasons, but they've recently made the decision that season 4 will be the last season.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the story that they're trying to tell, because obviously when you're doing another adaptation in a different form of media, it's not going to be a 1-for-1 adaptation. It's not, the mediums are just too different for you to be able to do it as a 1-for-1 adaptation. And would you want it, actually? Because if you already are familiar with the story, don't you want to be surprised in some small instances versus knowing exactly what's going to happen? So I know a lot of people complain about that stuff, but I'm like, it's a different medium, A, and B, like it would be boring if you knew exactly what was going to happen, even if you're seeing it in another medium.
Right.
And if we're talking about books versus live action, books are there a lot of times because a lot of the things that you're describing, whether it's a character, whether it's a location, all of that has to happen in your mind. So they have to go into so much detail, cover so many pages for you to kind of get a picture of what's going on. When you're seeing it visually, you don't need, you know, 30 minutes or to show something that normally takes maybe 5 pages or 4 pages of novel to be able to explain. You can do it within a few minutes and a person can get the point across. So a lot of people, you know, when we're talking about those different mediums, when you're doing something visually versus something that you're reading, so much more can be told to you visually versus what you're reading to be able to place in your mind to picture. So but I'm getting away from that. Final verdict for me, five X's as well. I did like the fact of how it was paced. To your credit of what you were saying, even with the live action adaptation that we had with X-Men Apocalypse,
Mm-hmm.
I liked, you know, how they were able to pace this out. They were able to give us a peek into the history of Apocalypse while also simultaneously dealing with three different timelines, you know, the past, present, and the future, with three different teams, mind you, and still were able to kind of bring it all together and have it come full circle, which I think when we're talking about the live action, the thing that kind of got it away from itself is trying to shoehorn in that Phoenix kind of subplot that they
Yeah,
carried over into the next film.
but
So
they didn't
I
do a good
think
job
that
of it.
that is an issue with that versus them deciding, because they did have an end credit scene in Days of Future Past, where it showed us a younger Apocalypse. I don't know if you remember that end credit scene where he's kind of like moving things around on this pyramid in
Yeah,
this end
I do
credit
remember
scene
that.
as like a teenage Apocalypse. But you know, maybe it just wasn't in the budget, you know, to be able to capture all of that stuff. Because I mean, you had that one scene at the beginning where he was going into the pyramid to change or switch his consciousness, but maybe it just wasn't in the cards to kind of do a full blown like Stargate esque, if you will, type of, you know, Egyptian story. So who knows?
Okay.
But
All
with
right
that, Harry, thanks so much for hopping on, man. Can you tell folks where they can find you?
then. Brain dead right now on
It's all good.
Instagram. You want to follow my cosplay? Just look at my tag Bishop Cosplay. You know, matter of fact, if you're looking at the little scene swipe, other way, Bishop. Follow my photography. Just Google Eyes of H Photography. I'm actually doing a little mini shoot session in August. So if you
Okay.
need headshots or want to do some family portraits or you just want to get some updated photos, let me know. Just let me know. Brandon, you have my information. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome, awesome. So again, I want to thank Harry for hopping on and talking about episode 4 of season 2 of X-Men 97. Stay tuned tomorrow because we're going to have another episode of This Week in Pop Culture to go over some of the things that happened this past week in pop culture. And we're going to have a live watch. Speaking of Game of Thrones, we're going to continue our live watch of House of the Dragon with the newest episode that they have tomorrow night. So you can join us then as well. So you guys have two opportunities. And then, of course, we do have Comic-Con that is happening in about a week and a half. So we should have some news that is streaming in as we get closer, as well as some exclusives that will be happening the week of. So just so you guys are aware. But you can find me at Brandon Troy ENT on X and then Brandon Troy _ENT on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there and see y'all soon, folks. Bye now.